Hello and welcome to the next session. I'm very happy to have Sarah Barnbrook here from Away from Keyboard. She is going to talk about what children teach us about online risk, which is very refreshing. Anytime someone thinks about children, we opened the conference with from a 17-year-old activist from New Zealand that said, "Why don't you listen to us?" So I'm really looking forward to what you have to say. Thank you so much for being here, Sarah.
It's my pleasure. Can I share my screen? Is that
Yes, you can. You should have the share
perfect?
button at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up my presentation. Okay, so thank you so much for coming today. I'm going to talk to you today about the vulnerability blueprint. And when I talk about what children teach us about online risk and why digital safety is an environment that we build and not a skill that we teach. We often hear of being safe, and I'm here to challenge that and help us look at safety from a different perspective and looking at it from the perspective of something that we're actually helping to build and to yeah, protect with. So I wanted you to consider, think about a specific child. It might be your own, it could be a student or a young person in your community. And I want you to really imagine them, their experience with technology. How are they interacting with it? What are the great, amazing things that technology can provide to them? We've heard throughout this conference about the different forms of technology that kids are utilizing. And, most recently could be some of the emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. And I want you to consider all the amazing things that that could also provide to that child, all the amazing creative things that they could do with it, all the amount of information at their fingertips, and all of those other people across the world that are looking to connect, maybe with them, maybe not. Um, but also consider at the same time all those opportunities, all of those things that are present, and all of the risks that are also present, all the exposures that could happen to them, whether that was through manipulation or harassment, or sometimes, these systems that they're interacting with that were never actually designed for children. So children are accessing things that have initially been set up for adults and not with children in mind. And I think that it's becoming very clear with a lot of the different tech platforms that, particularly children are interacting with, that they are definitely built as a business, as a profit model, and that children are now being exposed to things that yeah, definitely should not be exposed to them. And so the reality is that, they're navigating a space right now that is actually not built for children. And it's increasingly becoming more prevalent, as you can see with anyone that's, touching technology now can see, especially with emerging technologies becoming more and more prevalent with through anything you do, whether you're writing an email or sending a text message, suggested prompts are already there as well. So how do we help children understand to look at the things that they're seeing to discern if it's safe or not, to discern if it's the truth or not, or even discerning if it's biased or not. These are all very complicated concepts. So when we're considering digital safety, we need to understand that it's not a solitary burden that we can only place. We can't just tell them that they need to be safe. We need to, at the same time, understanding, they need to understand their digital literacy and what it means to navigate when you're online and interacting with technology. And also at the same time, teaching them resilience when they're encountering things, building a strong relationship with them so they would come to you if something happened. And also teaching them that sort of cybersecurity skilling as far as, don't click on the wrong thing, don't go into certain spaces. So it's how do we help wrap all that up together, because at the moment we talked about kids to be safe. Um, I'm here to, talk about challenging that notion of being safe. What does that mean, and why is the burden always placed on the child when we should be helping structure around an environment that actually is safe? So, as I said earlier, the internet is not an environment that was designed with children in mind. As much as there's this amazing opportunity and, this creativity and all the things that they could do and the possibilities to innovate and also to find those connections, there are also those other aspects to it that, can be incredibly dangerous, incredibly risky. And we need to make sure that when they're navigating these systems that were built for adults, and in particular with engagement, it's not just built for adults to be used by adults. It's actually, they're looking and targeting and trying to engage children as if they were adults. There's a lot of context there that obviously has a high level of concern just from that itself. But when we consider that, safety is not a solitary skill that children must develop, and that we need to consider that safety is that environment that adults and communities actually can build around them. So it's not just a skill. It's actually an environment that we're going to help build for them. So I want to have a discussion quickly about, the gap between those technological rules and the relational needs. So when we tell them about things that they, should or shouldn't do online, whether you're going to share your personal information, or, whether they shouldn't talk to strangers or they shouldn't send photos, we need to also consider those underlying needs. Like, what are the needs that they are looking for? What are they seeking for? For example, it could be looking at loneliness and the desire to be seen, or it could be looking at, that curiosity and that search for belonging, or it could also be that pressure to fit in and to be understood. It's really important to understand, and I speak often about this essence of belonging. And when belonging is missing offline, that the internet or those connections that you can make in that environment, that is a place where those can be found. And I mean, obviously, with that comes some significant risks. And risk is relational, so it's about people, and it's not necessarily always technological. So we need to understand that what are kids using it for, what do they need, and how do we bolster them, and how do we make them feel stronger so that when they're in those environments, that they are more resilient. I want to discuss vulnerability, and I want to talk about it that, vulnerability is an environment. It is not a personality trait. And it's very important that I think there's a shared understanding about vulnerability. It's certainly not a weakness. It's not a moral failing or a fixed trait of the child. It has a contextual, so it's shaped. And it, whether they feel connected and they feel safe and asking for help, it's also very dynamic, and they move in and out of vulnerability. And that also can depend on what's happening on their offline life as well. So it's a very complex, nuanced issue, and it's something that we definitely need to be considering, how are all of those aspects and those pillars interconnected as well, and how does this actually flow when it's going. As I said, vulnerability fluctuates based on a life and the different events of life. So you can see what's happening offline definitely affects what's happening online. Where are they at with their family? How are their friendship connections? How, are they getting the attention to fill their own, cup at home? Are they getting that with another a safe adult in their offline world? Where is that level of emerging risk for them? And all of those factors are very intricate factors that are fluctuating. They're not stagnant. They fluctuate, and that is the great difficulty. And I completely understand how complex it is, and that because children are constantly moving in and out of vulnerability, especially when you look at um, their offline connection to other people and their family stability. That's a very dynamic space, and we need to really be aware of that and understanding how we respond to it, especially the adults that are supporting the child in their life need to make sure that they actually are really responsive there, because those small moments are where some of the most vulnerable risks are at. So we need to make sure that we're constantly, checking in with your child, ensuring that they're feeling connected, ensuring that they're feeling safe, and ensuring that they would be willing to come to you if something would happen. So vulnerability, um, I talk a lot about how vulnerabilities can stack and how they can create risk. So this is a visual representation of that. So whether you have um, other aspects to it, that could also compound this. So you may have neurodivergence, or they could have a disability. There could also be school isolation. Or social isolation. They could be a particular family stress or trauma that's happened in the family. There could be an economic disadvantage. Now, none of these in isolation necessarily mean that they're automatically going to lead to a path to harm. Um, but what is really important to be understanding is that when they do stack, they do compound, and the risk can multiply. So if you consider vulnerability and you're considering all those other different layers, when they're stacking up like that, they're adding to the potential for something to happen. So it's very important as parents and as adults that are supporting children to understand, where's the bigger picture here? What are all the things that are at play for that child? And also, understanding where were they at with that fluctuating vulnerability? Where are they at with this, what's happening at home, what's happening at school, what's happening in their peer group? All of those things are very nuanced. And it's very important that we're constantly checking back in with our children and with the kids that we're supporting. So the difficulty is that when those vulnerabilities are stacking, what can happen is that it will start to create these other side effects. So you may consider that, if harm's going to grow in silence, when there's all those little weak connections that are there, with those, the stacking risks or the stacking vulnerabilities, you need to understand that, with that comes the counterbalance that the child, maybe having that fear of loss, so they don't want to lose the device if that's their connection to something else, that they may be very worried about losing access to technology, so they may not want to discuss if something happens. So they may have fear of punishment. They're worried about getting into trouble. So they don't want to report something because they don't want it to cease, because they're getting something from it, whether that is, with their own attention and some of the things they're dealing, or getting attention from somebody else. So there's also that the fear of being misunderstood, so they don't think that you're not going to get them, you're not understanding what they're saying. And because they assume that adults simply will not understand, they may not tell you. And so then the end result there is that they may just become silent. And so they're not going to be sharing, they're not going to be reporting, and they're not going to be connecting with you when things get tricky. And that's a very vulnerable time that we need them to be coming to us when things happen and when things get tricky. So when I talk about shifting the architecture of our response to that, so in the traditional model, you have the child who has their skill of being safe. We have that nature of vulnerability, and it could be considered a weakness or some sort of flaw, that it may be, that they just need to be more confident or stronger. That's why I was very clear earlier to say this is not a weakness. This is not a personality trait. This is an experience. This vulnerability is not a moral failure. In the traditional model, there's primary intervention where, you may have specific rules and then specific behavioral controls over that. And so the responsibility then is still very individual, put down on the child, to be safe. So when we're looking at the my blueprint model, it's looking at the community, that environment base. It's looking at that nature of vulnerability and understanding, the contextual nature of it, the cumulative nature of it, is it stacking, and the dynamicness, and how quickly can it shift, and being attuned to your child, attuned to the children that are around you to understand, oh, something's happening, and being alert to it. And also, that primary intervention, that relationship connection, and that early recognition, so that you could identify it, you're noticing the shift, and you're able to respond to it. You're able to extend yourself in that way. There's this, a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility, obviously, to put on to parents, and it is a lot, but it's really essential that in this very modern, changing world, that we are dialed into our kids. We are able to be aware of what's happening in their life, and those subtle shifts can happen very quickly, and it's staying alert to them, and it's moving that intervention upstream. So the more upstream that we can move, the more that we can prevent harm. So it's looking at that very proactive space of building that connection, ensuring that your child or the children that you are supporting have that belonging, that they have you have that really strong established trust relationship with them. There's that shared community responsibility, that we're going to be providing an environment for them to feel safe and connected, and supported. And if you look at the midstream, that observational, you may recognize those vulnerabilities, and you can see those changing behaviors. Or if you're looking downstream and you're very reactive, it's crisis, that when it leads to exploitation, or it leads to bullying. And that's often where you see a lot of the funding sitting, which is at that downstream reactionary setting. And if we could just move upstream, if we could just go before it gets to harm, it's so much easier to manage, it's so much easier to help in that space than it is to treat harm. When harm occurs, it's far more expensive, far more invasive, and I know, and detrimental to the this, not necessarily just the skill set, but the confidence and the self-esteem of the child, to get to the point where there's actual harm, and then treating that harm. Um, so much more difficult. So if we can look at, that relational safety, and then how we could transform the behavior. So when they are more likely to question what that they see online. So the more connected that they are, the more that they have that safety net from their community, the more that we have that in that safety environment for them, the more likely that really connected child would then be able to question what they see online. They wouldn't just take it at face value. They wouldn't just assume that what they're seeing is right. They wouldn't just, be so easily validated by somebody that was, trying to validate them. And maybe they would question why. They're far more likely, when they're very connected and they have that real sense of security, to go to adults, to ask the adults for help in their life. If you're encountering something that doesn't seem right, you'll go to the adult in your life, and you'll ask them questions about, is this right? They're also more likely to disclose if something has happened. If it was an uncomfortable experience, they're more willing to share that with you when they have all those other things and all those other needs met. And they're far more resilient when something goes wrong. If by chance they did encounter something that wasn't, um, good, they would be able to come to you and be able to share that with you. So then we look at protection, and we look at that safety environment, and we can see that, the child is right there in the center, and they're not carrying that burden alone. And then you have the trusted adults who are recognizing those very early warning signs, those subtle shifts that are happening. And, rippling out from that, you could see that the families and the schools that are also involved in that child's life can also help look and can, provide that level of belonging and connection, far before that sort of crisis could occur. And then if you go out from there even further, and that real safety net is that looking at all the other ways that kids feel connected to their community, whether that's through youth groups or sporting clubs or those local networks, it's really helping them form that really broad safety net to provide them that environment of safety. So, when communities can build environments of connection and care, safety becomes possible long before crisis can occur. And because when children are feeling safe enough to speak, then harm loses its power to stay hidden. And that's a really important concept. This is just a very beautiful infographic that's sort of taking you through what that looks like to redefining vulnerability and leading to that anatomy of all those different risk layers. And, those children that are searching for belonging that they may not have in their offline world, and what that looks like when it's relational and not technical. And how if we break some of those things down and see connection and community and belonging, how you can help shift up that upstream and helping them understand that safety is not a skill that children should carry alone. This is a community response. So thank you very much. I'll leave you with my statement that I say often is that, technology should always expand opportunity and not amplify inequality and automate harm. I don't know if there's any questions, but
Hi, Sarah. I jumped in. Actually, that was really fascinating. I feel it was, if we could put all the talks together, this really was, as you say, a blueprint, for like there's a place for so many, how many different, activities, and that was just very beautifully expressed. And if I may ask, like, what was your, um, you've tried this out with kids, I assume, right? Do they feel empowered then? I mean, how is
I
it?
think that, yeah, the more we can, push belonging, I think belonging is the answer for many things in our community. And I think it goes beyond just internet safety. But
Mhm.
belonging itself is something that is, drastically needed. The more that we seem to be interacting with technology, we're losing some of that face-to-face connection as well. So I think belonging in your offline world is really essential to make sure that
Mhm.
you're actually getting whatever that biochemical reaction is when you're interacting with another human and you're getting that, that feedback from them, is really, really essential to our long-term well-being. And as I talk about those, that stacking vulnerability is that it's provides a better protection. I think that you're not as exposed when you have a lot of belonging.
That's really interesting. Actually, the second session today was called the Table Talk Project. It was a man from Australia who's trying to teach people to speak again around the dinner table. So
Oh,
exactly for this
great.
reason,
Perfect. Yes.
to help people stay safe. And that's the exactly what you said. He said the same thing. Yeah. So it's amazing. As a mother, it makes me extremely happy to see these movements, and thank you very much. I'm just looking if
Thank you
there's
for,
any. Yeah.
yes.
No, just looking, there was no questions, but
Okay.
yeah. Thank you. Have a good
All
day.
right. Thank you.
Bye.